Lighting is the #1 factor in image quality. If you want to have better looking productions, invest in your lighting. And though it is the most important thing, it's not the most difficult. I have 5 lighting tips lined up for you, so if you're ready, let's take 5. There's no substitute for good lighting. The fact is, if you start with grainy, poorly lit footage, your end result's going to be compromised. And no matter what people might try to tell you, it really doesn't matter how good your camera or editing software are. Even the best equipment can't make up for lackadaisical lighting. In this episode, I'll share 5 tips from my own experience to help you light right. Tip number 1, shoot for 3. 3-point lighting is the time-tested standard for lighting talent for TV and film. A 3-point lighting setup consists of a key, a fill, and a backlight. The key light is typically positioned to the front of the subject, slightly to one side. It provides the primary source of illumination in the setup, and its quality and characteristics help establish the mood of the scene. The fill is less powerful than the key light. It's positioned on the side opposite the key and serves to soften or fill in the shadows created by the key light. The backlight, or hair light for those of you who have hair, is positioned above and behind the subject so that it casts light on the subject's head and shoulders. This adds depth and separates him from the background. Learning and using 3-point lighting isn't difficult. It'll make a huge difference in the look of your footage and in the overall professionalism of your productions. If you're not using it, it's time to start. Tip number 2, set the mood with shadows. Shadows help create the illusion of depth on a 2-dimensional screen. When a bright key light is positioned close to the camera at the 6 o'clock position, the result is what we call flat lighting. Flat lighting is emotionally neutral. If you're doing news, this might be fine. But if you want to add emotion, merely flooding your subject with bright flat light isn't enough. Generally speaking, flat lighting comes across as lazy lighting. Lighting can be used to move and manipulate shadows to create the illusion of depth on a flat screen. To add depth, position the key light so that it strikes your subject at an angle, not straight on. The size, angle, and intensity of the shadows cast by the key help set the mood of the scene. As you move the key light farther to the side, the mood becomes more and more dramatic. Once the key light is positioned at the 3 o'clock position, you have extreme drama. For most scenes, I like to position my key at about the 4:30 position. This gives me a little bit of depth, but not too much drama. Once your key is set, use the fill light to soften its shadow to your liking. Every scene that you shoot has its own emotion. The secret to good lighting is to position your lights to match the mood of the scene. Tip number 3, soften up. The quality of your lighting helps establish the feel of your scene. The quality of a light, referring to its hardness or softness, can be determined by examining the shadows that it casts on your subject. A hard light casts a dark shadow with a sharp or narrow shadow edge transfer. Soft light casts a lighter shadow with a wider gradient shadow edge transfer. Hard light can make a subject look intense, even wicked. Soft light is always more flattering to the face than hard, and it's preferred in most setups. Small, focused lamps cast hard light and shadows. Larger, more diffuse lamps cast softer light and shadows. You can change the quality of a light and soften its effect by adjusting its distance from the subject. As you move a light farther away, the beam spreads and therefore softens. Or you can add diffusion material to the front of the lamp to spread the light. Tip number 4, handle hard-to-light people. Some people are easy to light. Others take a little more effort. Some people are inherently more difficult to light than others. The top 3 problems you'll run into as you set your lights are glasses, bald heads, and dark skin. And while the solutions are slightly different, the problem is essentially the same: bright, glowing hotspots created by reflections of your lights on their face. When lighting a person with glasses, lights placed anywhere near the camera create bright specular highlights on the lenses of the subject's specs. A specular highlight is the mirrored reflection of the light source on the subject. Bald heads are somewhat less of a problem, but you'll still get bright glowing hotspots across the cranium. And when you expose subjects with dark complexions properly, you often end up with hotspots on the tip of the nose, forehead, cheeks, and chin. For glasses, the solution is to move your lights up and out. Raise your lights higher on their stands and position them as far to the sides as possible until the reflections are gone. A strong fill helps soften the dramatic effect created by this position of the lights. The solution for people with bald heads and dark skin is the same. They need to be lit with very large, very soft lights positioned as close to them as possible. The goal is to make that specular highlight larger than the subject's face, bathing them in soft, flattering light. Tip number 5. Light the whole shot. There's more to lighting a subject than just lighting the subject. The job doesn't end when your subject is lit. You're not finished until you've lit the whole shot. Save a light or two for your background. This might mean pinching your barn doors down to create a shaft of light across the set, or adding a gel for a splash of color. Taking a little extra time to dress your set with light will greatly improve the overall look and feel of your shot. There you go, 5 tips for lighting talent. Tip number 1, shoot for 3. Number 2, set the mood with shadows. Number 3, soften up. Number 4, handle hard to light people. And number 5, light the whole shot. One last bit of advice. When setting your lights, it's important to remember that your camera sees the world very differently than your naked eye. You always need to use a monitor when adjusting your lights. Well, these 5 simple tips can't begin to cover everything there is to know about lighting. My hope is that I've inspired you to think just a little bit more about the way you light your subjects.